In any case, John Berlau is with us. He is the director of the Center for Investors and Entrepreneurs at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. CEI.org is their website. And John, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Tom.
John, you've got this op-ed in the New York Daily News that you wrote. It's called "Sink Schumer's Dangerous Shareholder Bill of Rights. It's Micromanaging Madness." And by the way, the lights here in the studio are flickering. If we suddenly vanish from the airwaves or whatever, well, I don't know what to say beyond that. The lights are flickering here in Portland. John, give us the gist of this.
Well, what my critique of the bill is, it's called the Shareholder Bill of Rights, but I think it would just really impose just a cookie-cutter form of corporate governance that would deny shareholders choices, such as requiring that the CEO of a company also not serve as a chairman. But some of the best companies have, for shareholders, like Google, everything from Google to Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, have actually been run that way. So it would end what has been a lot of successful corporate governance structure for many companies.
Right. I think this is just a very weak starting point, frankly. I mean, I take your point, and I would say that not only should we say that it's illegal for the CEO and the chairman to be the same thing, but let me take that a couple of steps further. I would say that it should be not illegal, that it should be taxed to the point where it would be stupid for a corporation to do it, as was the case before the Reagan administration, for companies to compensate their executives with stock, because the interests of stockholders are different than the interests of the company itself, number one. Number two, it should be illegal for corporations to own stock in other corporations. Number three, it should be illegal for corporations to do more than one thing. If you want to have a company that runs a TV network, that's one company. If they want to make jet engines, that's another company. If they want to make nuclear bombs, that's a third company. And number four, every company should have as their first statement in their articles of incorporation a sentence that says the primary purpose of this company is to contribute to the public good. And then after that, they do it by the way they do it. All of those things, by the way, John Berlau, would simply take us back to the way corporations were governed, literally from the founding of this country until the 1920s.
I differ with a lot of things on that. I think one of the innovations in liberalizing corporate law is that anyone could form a corporation where a progressive radio network.
I'm not opposed to that. This radio show is owned by a corporation, which I own. I'm not opposed to the corporate form. What I'm saying is that I believe that if I, as the owner of the corporation that owns this radio show, decide that I also want to go into the business of environmental remediation, which is a hot business right now, that I should start a separate corporation to do that.
Who would I think the marketplace can decide that whether a separate corporation or.
But that's the problem, John. There is no marketplace. The marketplace is created by government. Corporations are inventions of government. When you or I incorporate, we go to a Secretary of State and we say we would like a bunch of special benefits enforced by law, enforced by guys with guns. We want a bunch of special benefits like we can deduct from our taxes the cost of lunch. We can deduct from our taxes the cost of health insurance. We can deduct from our taxes the cost of traveling across the country. And in exchange for that, we're going to fill in the blank. And I think that the fill in the blank should be the first sentence. We're going to run a business in a way that benefits the public good.
The problem is you'd have all different people have different definitions of what the public good is, and different.
Well, you know who the arbiter of that is. The arbiter of that in every state in the Union, because that was required in every state in the Union, that sentence be the first sentence in every corporate charter up until the 1890s, the charter-mongering era. That sentence was in the charter of every corporation, and the arbiter of that was the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State of every state in the Union every year was required to look at every corporation and ask the question, is this corporation operating in the public good or not? And there were thousands from the 1860s until the 1890s, during that 30-year period when this was most aggressively enforced as the corporate form was becoming very large as a result of the growth of the railroads and the industrialization of the United States after the Civil War. There were literally every year thousands of corporations that were given the corporate death sentence, that were dissolved by secretaries of state because they were operating in ways that were inconsistent with the public good. They were polluting communities. They were. I mean, fill in the blank. They were selling poisonous patent medicines. They were doing things that were not right. Now, companies just get a fine, and they call that a cost of doing business.
I mean, we have other ways to address that. There are other laws against pollution, things like that. What I would be worried about with that is, say, you have a conservative Secretary of State or whoever issues the corporate licenses and says, oh, well, I don't think Michael Moore movies are in the public good. So you would give them a lot of discretion, whereas now, I mean, people, you could argue. I think most people in the corporate world, believe it or not, believe that what they're doing is in the public good. They're making products people like. They're adding competition to make things cheaper. So I think that really would just give too much discretion and could, stamp out some, activities that actually were in the public good, but not according to the government officials issuing the license.
Well, it didn't in the past. Arguably, there was a pretty corrupt period in the 1880s and 1890s, and there were some secretaries of state probably who were in collusion with John Rockefeller when he was building the Standard Oil Trust. But Ohio ultimately threw him out. They said this is illegal, and threatened to prosecute him threatened prison to John Rockefeller, which is why he moved to New Jersey. But I think that, this Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which says that that a corporation can't have somebody serve as both the CEO and the chairman of the board, that isn't even the beginning of the kind of corporate reforms we need in the United States, in my opinion.
Well, I wonder in Ohio, though, how many applications were denied of what could have been, innovative firms that actually would have served the public good because of that. That's the thing. It used to be the corporation was something, I know in England, you needed permission of the Crown or somebody in Parliament, and this gave a lot more, individual entrepreneurs without freedom from government discrimination as to.
Well, that oversight by the Secretary of State was not pre, it was post. It was they had to evaluate a company after it had been operating for a year. But the point is that we have a lot of corporations in the United States that are merely externalizing costs. They're dumping their pollution on all of us. The oil companies, for example. Here in Oregon, down in California, they have really, really strict limits on the amount of benzene that can be in gasoline, which is a contaminant of gasoline. It's a byproduct of refineries, but it's a very potent carcinogen, and it's a contaminant. And because you have such dense traffic in Los Angeles in particular, they've said to the oil companies, you have to take the benzene out of the gasoline. Well, it costs something like $50, $60 a pound to dispose of benzene, to environmentally safely dispose of benzene. So what do the oil companies do? They put it in the gasoline that they sell in Washington State and Portland. Because in Washington State and Portland, we have fewer car density, so we haven't hit the overall benzene levels. So you got Senator Ron Wyden standing out here by Highway 5 with a benzene monitor, finding that in this area of high-density automobiles, the benzene levels are 30 times higher than they are near a highway in California. In other words, cancer is being imported in the United States. They're putting toxic waste in our gasoline because it's cheaper to put it in our gasoline because it's mildly combustible. It's cheaper to put it in our gasoline than it is to dispose of it properly. How can anybody justify that? I don't think it's the area for corp. I think you if there's a problem with corporations, you pass a law against a specific activity rather than trying to do that through the corporate charter. But wouldn't we? I mean, as an advocate of competition, John Berlau, wouldn't you say, hey, if a corporation is poisoning the people of Washington and Oregon, they should cease to exist, and it'll create an opportunity for a lot of new entrepreneurs, a lot of new corporations to step into that gap.
They should be fined and things like that. But there are a lot of people part of that as far as the stockholders, things like that weren't,
But there could be hundreds or thousands of cases of cancer, and there's no way to quantify those costs and load that onto the company and say, okay, your fine is, what are we going to value human life at? $250,000? And there's 100 of them, so your fine is $2.5 million. Yeah. I mean, I say just kill them off, put them out of business, the company.
I don't know really what ending the corporate charter would do for the victims.
It would do what it did in the 19th century. It would cause them to have to distribute the assets of the corporation. And a new company could be reincorporated by the same people with many of the same assets, but they'd have to do business differently. Anyhow, it's kind of a fundamental difference in worldview, I think, John, between you and I. And I appreciate your coming on and talking about it. CEI.org.
John Mack, CEI.org. I was going to mention John Mackey of Whole Foods. It's also another chairman and CEO.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. You can read it at CEI.org.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.